Have you ever read a story that sends a shiver down your spine, a tale so strange, so out of place, that it sticks with you long after you've closed the book? The Bible, a text studied for millennia, holds such a story within its oldest pages. This is the story of the Nephilim. Who were they? Where did they come from? The mystery begins in the book of Genesis, just before the account of Noah and the great flood. The text speaks of a time when the sons of God saw the daughters of men and took them as wives. From these unions, a strange and mighty race was born. The Bible calls them the Nephilim. They were on the earth in those days and also afterward. They were described as the mighty men of old, the men of renown. Imagine a world where beings of immense power and stature walk the earth. The very name Nephilim is shrouded in mystery. Some believe it means the fallen ones. Others propose it means giants. This isn't just an old story confined to dusty scrolls. They reappear later, casting a long shadow over the history of ancient Israel. When Moses sent spies into the promised land of Canaan, they returned with a terrifying report. They spoke of a land that devours its inhabitants, a people so large that the Israelites felt like mere grasshoppers in comparison. They specifically named the descendants of Anak, who came from the Nephilim. This report struck fear into the hearts of an entire nation, altering the course of their journey and proving that the legacy of these giants was very much alive. The central question that confronts every reader is stark and unavoidable. Were the Nephilim real? Were there literal giants roaming the ancient world, a hybrid race born of a forbidden union? Or is this story simply a myth? Is it a symbolic tale meant to teach a moral lesson about sin, corruption, the boundaries between the divine and the human? The answer you lean towards can fundamentally change how you view not just the Bible, but the entirety of ancient history. This is not a simple matter of belief. It is a challenge to our understanding of reality itself, a fork in the road between the world as we see it and a world that might have been. For those who approach the scriptures as a historical record, the presence of the Nephilim is a fact to be understood. They see these accounts not as allegory, but as a genuine memory of a bygone era. They point to the specificity of the text, the recurring mentions across different biblical books, and the tangible fear these beings inspired. To them, dismissing the Nephilim as myth is to ignore the plain reading of the text. It's an attempt to sanitize a history that is uncomfortable and strange, to make the ancient world fit neatly into our modern scientific boxes. They argue that we must take the Bible at its word, even when it describes things that defy our expectations. On the other side of the debate are those who see the story of the Nephilim as a powerful piece of ancient mythology. They suggest that the tale is symbolic, a way for ancient writers to explain the profound wickedness that had gripped the world before the flood. In this view, the sons of God might represent corrupt kings or fallen human lineages, and their giant offspring could be a metaphor for tyrannical rulers and the monstrous pride that leads to humanity's downfall. This interpretation seeks to find a deeper theological meaning in the story, viewing it as a timeless parable about the dangers of hubris and the consequences of blurring sacred boundaries. However, the debate doesn't end with these two opposing views. There is a third path, one that blends history with mythology. Perhaps the story of the Nephilim is a culturally filtered memory of real events or real people. Could it be that ancient Israelites encountered unusually tall and powerful tribes, and through the lens of their worldview explained their existence with a supernatural origin story? This perspective acknowledges that ancient peoples did not see the world as we do. For them, the spiritual and the physical were deeply intertwined. A story could be both literally true in its essence and mythologically true in its telling, capturing a historical reality within a framework of divine drama. So where does this leave us? We are standing at the threshold of a great mystery, armed with ancient texts and modern questions. Dead Sea Scrolls, Babylonian tablet, Egyptian carving of towering figures. The story of the Nephilim invites us on a journey. It is a quest into the heart of the Bible and far beyond its pages. We must become detectives, piecing together clues from scripture, history, and archaeology. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It requires an open mind, a willingness to challenge assumptions, and a genuine desire to seek the truth, no matter where it may lead. It is a call to all of us, person of faith, or a skeptic, a historian, or a seeker of untold stories. In this investigation, we will dive headfirst into the primary sources. We will read the exact verses from Genesis, Numbers, and other books that mention these enigmatic beings. We will explore the original Hebrew words and what they might have meant to the people who first wrote and heard them. Understanding the ancient context is crucial. We cannot simply impose our modern ideas onto these texts. We must try to step into the minds of the ancient Israelites and see the world through their eyes. Only then can we begin to grasp the true impact and significance of the Nephilim in their world and narratives. Our journey will not be confined to the lands of ancient Israel. We will broaden our search, looking at the cultures that surrounded them. Egyptians, Babylonians, Canaanites. Did they have similar stories? We will uncover a surprising truth. Tales of giants and demigods are not unique to the Bible. They are found across the ancient Near East, and indeed around the world. By comparing these legends, we can see the biblical account in a much broader context. Does this mean the story is just another myth? Or does it suggest a shared global memory of a time when giants truly walked the earth? Finally, we will bring our investigation into the modern era. We will examine the ongoing debates among scholars and theologians. We'll look at the scientific and archaeological attempts to find evidence for giants in the past. What have they found? What hoaxes and famous theories have emerged from this search? We will explore how the story of the Nephilim continues to captivate us today, in books, in movies, and in our collective imagination. This is your invitation to join the quest. Together, we will peel back the layers of time and legend to uncover the truth behind the Bible's greatest mystery. The journey to expose the Nephilim begins now. Our investigation begins where the story itself does. In the 6th chapter of the book of Genesis. The verses are brief, almost cryptic, yet they have sparked millennia of debate. They appear just before the epic account of Noah's flood, acting as a dark prelude to God's judgment upon the earth. The text sets a scene of a world spiraling out of control, a world where strange and unsettling events are unfolding. It is here that we get our first startling glimpse of the Nephilim. The passage is so unusual, so different from the surrounding narrative, that it demands our full attention. It feels like a fragment of a much older, forgotten story has been preserved within the pages of Scripture. Let's read the words directly from the Bible. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 state, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." This simple statement opens a floodgate of questions. Who precisely are these sons of God? The term itself, Ben ha-Elohim in Hebrew, is loaded with meaning. It is not talking about ordinary men. In other parts of the Old Testament, this phrase is used to describe divine beings, angels, members of God's heavenly court. This raises a shocking possibility of a transgression, not just between humans, but between realms. The passage continues to build the mystery, directly linking this forbidden union to the emergence of the Nephilim. Verse 4 is the crucial piece of the puzzle. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man and they bore children to them. Notice the wording carefully. It does not say the Nephilim were the offspring of these unions, but that they were on the earth when these unions were happening. This has led some scholars to believe the Nephilim existed even before this event. The text creates a picture of a world already inhabited by these powerful figures, whose story becomes deeply entangled with this celestial rebellion. For the ancient reader, this account would have been profoundly disturbing. It described a fundamental violation of the created order. God had separated the heavens from the earth, the light from the darkness, the waters from the land. Now, beings from the heavenly realm were crossing that boundary, meddling in human affairs in the most intimate way possible. This wasn't merely a story of human sin, it was a cosmic disruption. It set the stage for why such a catastrophic event as a global flood was necessary. The world was not just wicked, it was contaminated by an unholy mixture that threatened the very fabric of creation itself. The identity of the sons of God is the single most important key to unlocking this passage. For centuries, interpreters have wrestled with this phrase. It's led to three major theories. The most ancient interpretation, fallen angels, widely held in early Judaism and early Christian writers. Rebellious angels, captivated by human beauty, forsook their heavenly station and descended to earth. They procreated with mortal women, producing monstrous consequences. A second interpretation, the line of Seth. Sons of God equal sign Seth's righteous lineage. Daughters of men equal sign Cain's wicked line. A cautionary tale about intermarriage corrupting the faithful. The sin was spiritual corruption of Seth's line. Now a third view, tyrannical rulers. In the ancient Near East, kings were described as sons of gods. This theory says the sons of God were powerful despots and aristocrats. They seized women and built harems through force. Their offspring became a mighty warrior class, enforcing tyranny and oppression. Each theory reshapes what the Nephilim might be. If fallen angels, children were semi-divine giants, literal abominations. If Seth-Cain mixing, children were human, giant as a metaphor for wickedness. If tyrant kings, offspring were powerful warriors, giant came from fearsome deeds. So in the end, the true nature of the Nephilim depends entirely on who their fathers were. The text in Genesis 6 actually gives us another descriptive label for these figures. It says, "They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." This phrase, ha-gibberim in Hebrew, is really packed with meaning. The word gibberim is often translated as mighty men or warriors, and it conjures up images of legendary heroes, figures of immense strength and prowess, kind of like the champions and demigods of Greek mythology. Think Hercules or Gilgamesh. These were not just tall people, they were figures of epic stature, whose deeds were sung in the legends of ancient peoples. The Bible is basically acknowledging that these figures were famous, their stories well known in the world at that time. This description adds a layer of historical flavor to the account. The Bible isn't presenting the Nephilim as some obscure secret, it's referencing figures who were already legendary, the men of renown. It's almost as if the author is saying, you've all heard the stories and songs about the great heroes of the past. Now I will tell you the true dark origin of these famous figures. This suggests the biblical writer was actually reframing a well-known narrative from the ancient world, but giving it a theological explanation. The great heroes of pagan myth were not to be celebrated. They were the product of a terrible sin that brought divine judgment upon the whole world. The term of old places these events in the distant primeval past, a heroic age now lost to time. For the ancient Israelites, this was the world before the flood, a different era, with different rules. The presence of these gibberim was a defining feature of that corrupt, antediluvian age. Their might wasn't a sign of divine blessing, but of cosmic chaos. Their fame, their renown, was not a mark of honor, but of infamy in the eyes of God. They were the ultimate symbols of human pride and power run amok, a power that was born from a forbidden union and used to fill the earth with violence. This connection to violence is absolutely crucial. The verse immediately following the description of the Nephilim and the mighty men states, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." The narrative directly links the appearance of these powerful beings with the overwhelming corruption that consumed humanity. Whether they were the cause of the violence or just the most prominent symptom of it, their presence coincides with a world so depraved that God resolves to wipe the slate clean. They are not heroes to be emulated, but monsters whose legacy is destruction. The story of the Nephilim in Genesis is not told in a vacuum. It actually serves a specific narrative purpose, to explain the extreme level of corruption that provoked the Great Flood. The text paints a pretty grim picture. It wasn't just that people were making bad choices. The very inclination of their hearts was described as only evil continually. That suggests a complete and total moral collapse, a saturation of sin so deep that it had infected the very core of human nature. The author needed to provide a reason for such an absolute state of depravity, and the story of the celestial rebellion and the resulting Nephilim offered a powerful explanation for this unprecedented wickedness. The presence of these semi-divine or tyrannical figures would have dramatically accelerated the spread of violence and lawlessness. Imagine a world where beings of superior strength and intellect, unburdened by human morality, roamed the land. They would have dominated humanity through fear and force. The mighty men would have set a new standard for pride. The mighty men would have set a new standard for lust. The mighty men would have set a new standard for bloodshed. Their actions would have glorified violence and power, influencing all of human culture. In this context, the earth being filled with violence is not an exaggeration. It's the logical outcome of a world where might makes right, and the strong prey on the weak without restraint. This narrative provides a pretty profound theological message about the nature of sin. The story illustrates that sin is not just a human problem. It has cosmic dimensions. The rebellion began in the heavenly realm and spilled over onto the earth, contaminating it. This idea of a spiritual infection helps explain why God's response had to be so drastic. A simple punishment just wouldn't do. A cleansing was needed. The flood was therefore not just an act of divine anger, but an act of divine surgery. It was a desperate measure to wash the world clean of an unnatural corruption that threatened to permanently ruin God's creation and the human project itself. Furthermore, this account sets a precedent for events later in the Bible. The Nephilim cast a long shadow. Their reappearance in the land of Canaan, centuries after the flood, becomes a major test of faith for the Israelites. The memory of this primeval terror, of these seemingly invincible giants, was deeply ingrained in their cultural psyche. So, understanding the original story in Genesis is honestly essential to understanding why the spies were so terrified, and why the conquest of the Promised Land was not just a military campaign, but a spiritual one. It was about finishing the job the flood started, cleansing the land of the giants' corrupting influence once and for all. Our investigation now takes us beyond the borders of ancient Israel. To truly understand the story of the Nephilim, we must ask a critical question. Were the Israelites the only ones telling stories about giants? The answer is a resounding no. When we expand our search to the cultures that surrounded Israel, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Canaan, we find a world teeming with similar legends, tales of powerful demigods, monstrous giants, primeval sages, born from the union of gods, and mortals were not the exception but the rule. This discovery forces us to see the Genesis account not in isolation, but as part of a much larger tapestry of ancient Near Eastern thought, a shared cultural landscape where the memory of giants loomed large. The existence of these parallel traditions presents us with a fascinating puzzle. Does it diminish the uniqueness of the biblical account, suggesting it's just another myth borrowed from its neighbors? Or could it point to something far more profound? Perhaps these widespread stories are echoes of a shared historical memory, a real event or era so impactful that it left its mark on cultures all across the ancient world. The biblical authors, in this view, were not simply copying pagan myths. Instead, they were engaging with these popular narratives, correcting them, and providing what they believed was the true, divinely inspired account of where these legendary beings actually came from and what their existence truly signified. Looking at the Canaanite culture, which the Israelites were commanded to displace, we find an immediate and powerful connection. The primary god of the Canaanite pantheon was El, and his divine council was known as the Sons of El. This linguistic parallel to the biblical Sons of God, or Bene Elohim, is striking. Canaanite myths, like the Ugaritic texts, are filled with stories of gods descending, interacting with humans, and engaging in conflicts that shape the earthly realm. The Israelites lived in a world saturated with these stories. Their account of the Nephilim, therefore, can be seen as a direct commentary on the beliefs of their neighbors, reframing the pagan gods as rebellious divine beings and their offspring as corrupting agents. Even in Egypt, a civilization known for its distinct and enduring culture, we find traces of similar ideas. Egyptian mythology speaks of a time of gods ruling on earth, a golden age that eventually gave way to the rule of human pharaohs. The pharaoh himself was considered the incarnation of the god Horus, a divine being in human form. While not a direct parallel to the Nephilim story, it shows a common regional mindset where the boundary between the divine and the human was fluid. The idea of divine or semi-divine beings walking the earth and producing offspring was not a foreign concept. It was a foundational belief that shaped the worldview of the entire ancient Near East, creating a rich context for the biblical narrative. Venturing northeast from Israel, we enter Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates. Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, a treasure trove of myths that resonate with Genesis. One of the most compelling parallels, the Apkallu. These were 7 semi-divine sages who were said to have existed before the Great Flood, created by the god Ea to bring the arts of civilization to mankind, part fish, part man, renowned for superhuman wisdom and power, serving as advisors to the earliest kings of the land. Both traditions speak of powerful non-human beings active before a cataclysmic flood. Both link these beings to early culture and kingship. But the Bible gives a starkly different moral judgment. Mesopotamians revered the Apkallu as culture bringers. The Bible frames pre-flood men of renown as the result of sinful union leading to corruption and violence. The Hebrew text recasts these figures as contamination. Another powerful echo is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, 2/3 god, 1/3 man. His divine heritage granted him immense strength and great stature, a giant among men. He is depicted as a powerful, often tyrannical ruler. His early reign was marked by the oppression of his people. This aligns with the theory of the sons of God as despotic kings, whose offspring were mighty tyrants. The Gilgamesh trope was familiar where Abraham's story began. These Mesopotamian myths formed the cultural backdrop for the Nephilim. Ancient Israelites wouldn't be shocked by divine-human interaction. They were shocked by the Bible's theological spin on it, not just mighty heroes. It was a polemic, a declaration. Pagan legends were part of a cosmic rebellion against Yahweh. It turned a common story into theological identity and a moral warning. While geographically more distant, the mythologies of ancient Greece and Rome offer vivid parallels to the story of the Nephilim. The Greek tales of the Titans, the Gigantes, are particularly striking. The Titans were powerful deities, children of Uranus and Gaia, who ruled a legendary golden age. They were overthrown by the Olympians, led by Zeus in the 10-year Titanomachy. This primeval defeat and imprisonment mirrors rebellious divine beings judged and cast down. Even more parallel is the Gigantes, literally earthborn, born of blood on the earth when Uranus was overthrown. They waged war on the gods, the Gigantomachy trying to seize the heavens. Earthborn giants challenging the divine order echoes the biblical cosmic rebellion. The Gigantes, like the Nephilim, threaten the boundary between heaven and earth. The pattern extends far beyond the Mediterranean and the Near East. As we cast our net wider across the globe, we find that cultures with no direct contact with one another tell surprisingly similar stories. In Norse mythology, the Jotnar were a race of giants who were the ancient enemies of the gods. In Hindu traditions, Daityas and Danavas were powerful, giant-like beings who often battled with the gods for control of the heavens. Even in the Americas, legends of a race of red-haired giants are found among Native American tribes, like the Paiute. The sheer prevalence of these tales is staggering, and honestly, it demands an explanation. This global phenomenon leads us back to 2 competing theories. The first is the theory of archetypes, championed by psychologists like Carl Jung. This view suggests that giants are a common myth that arises independently in different cultures because they represent a universal psychological concept. The giant is an archetype of overwhelming power, of the untamed forces of nature, or of the tyrannical father figure. According to this theory, different societies spontaneously create giant myths to explain and process these fundamental human experiences. The stories are similar not because of a shared history, but because the human psyche is universally similar. The second theory is that of shared or diffused memory. This perspective argues that these myths are not spontaneous inventions, but are distorted recollections of a real historical event or era. Proponents suggest that a single ancient story, perhaps of a real race of powerful individuals, technologically advanced individuals, or a real cataclysmic event, was passed down through generations. As humanity spread across the globe after an event like the Tower of Babel, they took this core memory with them. Over thousands of years, the story was embellished and adapted to fit each new culture's environment and beliefs, resulting in the diverse yet structurally similar giant legends we see today. Ultimately, whether you see these global giant stories as proof of a universal psychological archetype, or as fragmented memories of a real past, their existence gives the biblical account of the Nephilim a profound global context. It shows that the ancient Israelites were engaging with a theme that has captivated humanity for untold ages. The Bible's story is not just a strange, isolated tale, it is Israel's unique and authoritative answer to a question that people all over the world seem to have been asking. Were there once giants in the earth? And if so, where did they come from? The biblical text points to a definitive and deeply theological origin. As we move from the ancient world into the modern era, the mystery of the Nephilim does not fade. Instead, the debate intensifies, shifting from the campfires of ancient storytellers to the halls of academia and the pulpits of churches. Today, the battle over the identity of the Nephilim is fought with the tools of modern scholarship, textual criticism, historical analysis, theological debate. The questions remain the same, but the methods for answering them have evolved. Scholars and theologians continue to wrestle with Genesis chapter 6, their conclusions often shaping how they view the reliability and nature of Scripture itself. This is not just an academic exercise. It is a live debate with profound implications for faith and understanding. The central conflict mirrors the ancient one, centering on the identity of the sons of God. On one side, a rationalist approach seeks to ground the story in purely human terms, stripping away the supernatural elements. This view sees the Nephilim as offspring of human kings or competing lineages. On the other side, many scholars push back, urging we read the text as its ancient audience would have. That may mean accepting divine beings who intervene in human affairs. This divide creates tension. Can the Bible be both divinely inspired and reflect a mythological worldview? How do we separate history from theological metaphor? Modern scholars pore over every Hebrew word, comparing usage across the Old Testament to build their case. They analyze archaeological finds from the ancient Near East, looking for cultural context. They study early Jewish and Christian interpreters, tracing pre-modern readings. The result? A complex, contentious field, a battlefield where ancient texts and modern minds collide. Ultimately, every reader is drawn into this debate. When you read Genesis 6, you must choose. Are the sons of God angels, righteous humans, powerful kings? That choice ripples through your reading of the Bible. It shapes how you view the flood, the conquest of Canaan, and the nature of spiritual evil. The modern battlefield of interpretation is not just for scholars, it's a personal crossroad for every seeker of truth. One of the most popular and influential modern interpretations is the Sethite view. This theory proposes that the story of the Nephilim is not about supernatural beings at all. Instead, it is an allegory about the breakdown of social and religious boundaries within the human family. According to this view, the sons of God represent the righteous lineage of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. This was the godly line, the people who began to call upon the name of the Lord. In contrast, the daughters of men represent the wicked and worldly lineage of Cain, the first murderer. The story, therefore, is about the disastrous consequences of intermarriage between the faithful and the unfaithful. This interpretation gains significant traction for several reasons. For many modern readers, it is more palatable and less mythological. It removes the uncomfortable idea of angels procreating with humans, a concept that seems more at home in pagan myths than in the Bible. It transforms the narrative into a timeless moral lesson about the importance of spiritual purity and the dangers of compromising one's faith for the sake of worldly attraction. The sin is not a cosmic rebellion, but a human failure to remain separate and holy. The giants born from these unions are then seen not as literal giants, but as metaphorical ones, great in their wickedness, their pride, their rebellion against God. Supporters of the Sethite view point to the literary context of Genesis. The chapters leading up to Genesis chapter 6 carefully trace the two family lines, Cain's, characterized by violence and arrogance, and Seth's, presented as the hope for humanity. The story of the Nephilim, placed right after these genealogies, would naturally be read as the climax of this theme, the tragic merging and corruption of the holy line. The great wickedness that fills the earth is therefore the direct result of the godly people abandoning their devotion to God and being absorbed into a sinful, godless culture. It's a powerful and honestly pretty relatable warning. However, the Sethite view has significant weaknesses, which many scholars have pointed out. The phrase sons of God, or Bene Elohim, is used elsewhere in the Old Testament, such as in the book of Job, to clearly refer to angelic or divine beings, not human lineages. Furthermore, the text never explicitly identifies the sons of God as Sethites or the daughters of men as Cainites. This is an assumption brought to the text. Critics argue that this interpretation is a later attempt to demythologize a story that its original audience would have understood in a much more literal and supernatural way. It is an elegant solution, but one that may ignore the plain language of the text. In recent decades, there has been a major scholarly resurgence of the oldest interpretation, the fallen angel view. A growing number of theologians and biblical scholars, including prominent figures like Michael Heiser, argue that we need to resist imposing our modern worldview on the ancient text. They insist that the most faithful way to interpret Genesis chapter 6 is to understand it as its original audience did, as a literal account of divine beings abandoning their heavenly station and procreating with human women. This view, they argue, makes the most sense of the Hebrew language and the broader ancient Near Eastern context. This approach takes the term sons of God at face value, recognizing its consistent use for divine beings in other Old Testament texts. It also leans heavily on ancient Jewish writings from the Second Temple period, such as the Book of Enoch. While not part of the Bible, these texts were incredibly popular and influential during the time of Jesus and the Apostles. The Book of Enoch provides a vastly expanded account of the Genesis 6 story, naming the rebellious angels, called Watchers, and detailing the forbidden knowledge they taught humanity, weaponry, sorcery, even cosmetics, which corrupted the world and led to the flood. These ancient texts show that the angelic view was actually the dominant understanding for centuries. The implications of this view are honestly staggering. It suggests a world where the lines between the spiritual and physical realms were permeable. The Nephilim, as the hybrid offspring of this union, were a true abomination, an unnatural fusion of two different orders of creation. Their existence was a contamination of the human bloodline and a direct assault on God's created order. This cosmic level of sin provides a much more compelling reason for a punishment as drastic as a global flood. The world wasn't just morally wicked, it was genetically corrupted and spiritually corrupted by a hostile spiritual invasion, requiring a complete reset of creation. This interpretation also sheds new light on other mysterious passages in the Bible. It helps explain the apostles' references to angels who sinned and were kept in chains of gloomy darkness. It provides a powerful backstory for the spiritual warfare described throughout the New Testament. The conquest of Canaan, with its command to utterly destroy the giant clans, is no longer just a brutal military campaign. It becomes a divine cleanup operation, purging the promised land of the lingering genetic and spiritual footprint of this ancient rebellion. The angelic view, while challenging to our modern sensibilities, creates a remarkably consistent and dramatic narrative that connects many disparate parts of the biblical story. Beyond the debates over ancient texts, a parallel quest in the physical world, the search for hard evidence. If there were literal giants in the past, shouldn't we be able to find their remains? This question has fueled legitimate archaeological inquiry and a cottage industry of sensational claims and outright hoaxes. For over a century, newspapers, and now the internet, have been filled with reports of giant skeletons. These stories describe human-like remains measuring 9 feet tall, 12 feet tall, even 18 feet tall, often supposedly unearthed from ancient burial mounds or caves. The vast majority of these claims have been thoroughly debunked. One famous example, the Cardiff Giant. A 10-foot petrified man discovered in Cardiff, New York in 1869. It became a tourist attraction, before it was exposed as a hoax carved from gypsum. In the digital age, hoaxes are more sophisticated. Photoshopped images circulate online, showing archaeologists excavating enormous human skulls, or enormous femurs, often created for digital art contests, or simply to generate clicks, but presented as real evidence, muddying the waters for sincere seekers. This history has made mainstream archaeology skeptical. Paleontologists find giant prehistoric mammal bones, but there is no credible, verified fossil evidence of giant humans. Archaeologists have found individuals with gigantism, a rare medical condition causing abnormal growth. Yet these are isolated cases, not evidence of an entire population. The scientific consensus? No physical proof of the biblical Nephilim. This lack of evidence is a stumbling block for literalists. However, proponents of the Nephilim's reality are not always deterred. Some insist evidence was suppressed by institutions like the Smithsonian, claiming conspiracies that would upend history and evolutionary theory. These theories lack verifiable proof and are dismissed academically. Others say the Great Flood would have buried the evidence under miles of sediment. The search for bones remains a contentious arena where faith, science, and sensationalism collide. Whether they were real beings or symbolic figures, the Nephilim have undeniably broken free from the confines of Scripture and stormed into our modern culture. They've become archetypes of immense power, forbidden knowledge, and monstrous hybridity. Their story really resonates with our fascination for the mysterious, the ancient, and the transgressive. Authors, artists, and filmmakers have seized upon this powerful narrative, reimagining the Nephilim for a contemporary audience. They appear as fallen angels, ancient aliens, or superhuman villains in countless books, graphic novels, video games, and movies, becoming a staple of the fantasy and science fiction genres. In popular literature, the Nephilim are often romanticized. They're depicted as tragic, powerful figures caught between two worlds, blessed with incredible gifts, but cursed by their origins. This portrayal taps into modern themes of alienation and the search for identity. These stories explore what it would mean to be more than human, to wield immense power, and to carry the weight of a forbidden ancestry. They transform the biblical figures of corruption into brooding anti-heroes, turning a story of divine judgment into a saga of supernatural romance and conflict, a trend especially seen in best-selling young adult fiction series. The Nephilim have also become a cornerstone of alternative history theories and ancient astronaut theories. Proponents of these ideas, like Erich von Däniken, have reinterpreted the Genesis story in a science fiction context. In this view, the sons of God were not angels, but extraterrestrial visitors. The Nephilim were the result of genetic experiments, hybrid beings created by an advanced alien civilization. These theories propose that the mighty men of old were real, and their legendary power and forbidden knowledge were actually advanced technology. The Bible, in this reading, becomes a kind of garbled account of a real extraterrestrial encounter in humanity's deep past. This enduring cultural fascination reveals something profound about the Nephilim story. It speaks to a deep-seated human curiosity about our origins and our potential. It touches on our anxieties about power, technology, and the boundaries that define what it means to be human. The Nephilim serve as a powerful symbol for the other, for the unknown that both terrifies and fascinates us. Whether you see them as fallen angels, human tyrants, or ancient aliens, their story continues to force us to ask big questions about God, humanity, and the hidden forces that may have shaped our world. Their legend is as alive and potent today as it was thousands of years ago. After journeying through ancient texts, forgotten myths, and modern debates, we arrive at a crucial question. What does it all mean for us today? In a world of smartphones, space exploration, and scientific certainty, why should we care about a cryptic story of giants from thousands of years ago? The answer is that the Nephilim, whether fact or myth, hold a mirror up to our own time. Their story is not just a dusty relic of the past, it is a powerful and enduring legacy that continues to shape our understanding of faith, doubt, and the very nature of the world we live in. The questions they raise are timeless, touching upon the deepest parts of the human experience. The legacy of the Nephilim forces us to confront the possibility that reality is far more complex than it appears on the surface. In our modern age, we are often encouraged to believe that what we can see, touch, and measure is all that exists. The story of the Nephilim challenges this materialistic worldview head-on. It insists that there is an unseen realm, a spiritual dimension that can and does interact with our own. This idea, central to the biblical narrative, suggests that the great dramas of human history are not just driven by politics, economics, but are influenced by cosmic forces and spiritual conflicts that lie just beyond our perception. This ancient story also speaks directly to our contemporary anxieties about power, technology, and the blurring of boundaries. We live in an age of genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and unprecedented technological might. We are in many ways striving to become like gods ourselves, pushing the limits of what it means to be human. The tale of the Nephilim serves as a profound cautionary tale. It warns of the dangers of hubris, of seeking power without wisdom, and of transgressing natural and divine boundaries. It asks us to consider the potential consequences of our own relentless pursuit of becoming mighty men of renown. Ultimately, the Nephilim matter because they represent one of the Bible's great unsolved mysteries. Their story resists easy answers and simple explanations. It invites us not into comfortable certainty, but into a journey of discovery and wonder. It reminds us that faith is not about having all the answers, but about being willing to wrestle with difficult questions. For both the believer and the non-believer, the Nephilim provide a gateway into the profound strangeness and depth of the ancient world, challenging us to think bigger, dig deeper, and question the tidy narratives we have built for ourselves. Their legacy is a permanent invitation to explore the unknown. For the Christian believer, the story of the Nephilim offers far more than just a fascinating historical puzzle. It provides a crucial framework for understanding the spiritual realities described throughout the rest of Scripture. Taking the angelic interpretation seriously can transform how one reads the Bible. It suggests that God's redemptive plan sits against an ongoing cosmic conflict, a war that began long before Adam and Eve. The rebellion of the sons of God in Genesis 6 is not isolated, it's a key battle in a larger spiritual war. This view makes the Old Testament feel deeper and more dramatic. Driving the Canaanites out becomes more than a battle for territory. When the spies report seeing the descendants of Anak, the heirs of the Nephilim, it frames those battles as an act of spiritual cleansing. The Israelites are confronting not just tall warriors, but the physical and spiritual legacy of angelic rebellion. They are reclaiming sacred ground that had been defiled by the enemies of God, turning the conquest into a counter-offensive in a cosmic war. This lens also sharpens our view of the New Testament, when Paul says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the authorities, the cosmic powers over this present darkness. The Nephilim story gives a concrete Old Testament example of such powers interfering on earth. It gives weight and history to the idea of spiritual warfare, showing that the forces of evil are not abstract, but organized, intelligent, and have been actively working to corrupt creation from the very beginning. For believers today, the story of the Nephilim is a call to spiritual awareness and vigilance. It suggests that our personal struggles with sin and temptation are part of a much larger conflict. It encourages a life of prayer, reliance on God's power, and a commitment to holiness as an act of defiance against those forces. You are not a passive observer in this story, but an active soldier armed with faith and standing on the victory Christ has already won over these powers. For the skeptic, the agnostic, or the non-believer, the story of the Nephilim may not be accepted as historical fact, but it offers something equally valuable. It serves as an unparalleled window into the ancient human mind. To truly understand history, we must strive to understand how past civilizations saw the world, and the Nephilim narrative provides a vivid glimpse into the worldview of the ancient Israelites. It reveals a world where the natural and supernatural were not separate categories, but were deeply and inextricably woven together. For them, gods, angels, and monsters were as real as mountains and rivers. Studying this story allows us to appreciate the profound differences between our modern scientific mindset and the mythological consciousness of the past. In our world, we seek physical causes for events. In their world, they often saw divine or spiritual agency behind everything from storms to the birth of a heroic figure. The Nephilim story shows us that the Bible was not written in a vacuum. It was a product of its time and place, engaging with the common myths, ideas, and anxieties of the ancient Near East. Analyzing it as a piece of comparative literature reveals the cultural conversation the biblical authors were having with their neighbors. Furthermore, the story's function within the biblical narrative is a masterclass in ancient rhetoric and theology. Even if one doesn't believe in its literal truth, one can analyze why the story is told. It serves to explain the origin of profound evil, to justify a cataclysmic flood, and to frame later enemies as monstrous others who must be eradicated. It is a powerful piece of theological propaganda, shaping the identity of the Israelite people by defining them against a backdrop of cosmic chaos and pagan corruption. Understanding this narrative function is key to a sophisticated reading of the biblical text, regardless of one's personal beliefs. Ultimately, for the skeptic, the Nephilim story is a testament to the enduring power of myth. Myths are not just false stories, they are the vehicles through which cultures express their deepest values, fears, and aspirations. The tale of the giants who walked the earth is a powerful myth that grapples with timeless human questions about power, transgression, and our place in the cosmos. It demonstrates how our ancestors used storytelling to make sense of a chaotic and often terrifying world. To dismiss it as mere fantasy is to miss the opportunity to understand a crucial piece of our shared human heritage and the psychological landscape from which our modern world eventually emerged. In the end, the allure of the Nephilim lies in their refusal to be fully explained. They remain shrouded in mystery, forever eluding our attempts to neatly categorize them. This very ambiguity is what gives them their power. We live in an age that claims to have an answer for everything, where data and algorithms promise to solve every problem. Yet deep within the human spirit, there is an unquenchable thirst for mystery, for the things that lie beyond the edges of our maps and the limits of our understanding. The Nephilim are a testament to the fact that not everything can be Googled. This story satisfies a fundamental human need to believe that there is more to the world than meets the eye. It whispers of a past that was more magical, more dangerous, and more epic than our own. It's the same impulse that draws us to stories of lost continents like Atlantis, to tales of ancient astronauts, or to the search for mythical creatures. We want to believe that the world was once enchanted, and perhaps that some of that enchantment still lingers. The Nephilim are a direct link to that sense of primeval wonder, a fragment of a lost world that sparks the imagination and makes the universe feel larger and more mysterious. The ongoing debate itself is part of the allure. The fact that brilliant scholars can look at the same few verses of ancient text and come to wildly different conclusions is fascinating. It demonstrates the limits of our knowledge and the interpretive nature of truth. The Nephilim story becomes a playground for the mind, a place where we can weigh evidence, explore theories, and ultimately decide for ourselves what we believe. This process of investigation and personal discovery is often more rewarding than being handed a simple, definitive answer. The journey into the mystery is the point. So as we conclude this part of our investigation, we are left not with a final solution, but with a deeper appreciation for the question itself. The Nephilim challenge us to be comfortable with uncertainty and to embrace the mysteries that life presents. They remind us that the world is an ancient and complex place filled with stories that have the power to change the way we see everything. Their shadow falls across the centuries, not as a threat but as an invitation to keep seeking, to keep questioning, and to never lose our sense of wonder at the vast, untold story of which we are all a part. We have journeyed together through the mists of primeval history, navigating a labyrinth of ancient texts, competing theories, and profound theological questions. Our quest to unveil the Nephilim has led us from the cryptic verses of Genesis to the mythologies of cultures across the globe. We have stood on the modern battlefield of interpretation, witnessing the clash between symbolic readings and supernatural realities. We have explored the enduring legacy of these enigmatic figures, seeing how their story continues to shape faith, challenge skepticism, and fuel our collective imagination. Now, all these paths converge on this final moment, where we must step back and survey the vast and mysterious landscape we have uncovered together. The story of the Nephilim is not a simple one, and it offers no easy answers. It is a mosaic of possibilities. Are they the monstrous offspring of fallen angels, a literal hybrid race that corrupted the ancient world? A metaphor for the union of godly and wicked human families, a cautionary tale about spiritual compromise, the legendary warrior class born from the harems of tyrannical kings, a symbol of humanity's lust for power? We have seen that each interpretation offers a compelling narrative. The truth may lie in one path or a complex fusion of them all. What is undeniable is the profound impact of their story. The Nephilim are not a minor biblical footnote, they are a key that unlocks a deeper understanding of the entire biblical narrative. Their presence provides a motive for the Great Flood, a context for the conquest of Canaan, and a backdrop for the New Testament's teachings on spiritual warfare. They force us to grapple with the Bible's most challenging aspects, pushing us beyond a sanitized modern reading into the strange and often terrifying worldview of the ancient authors. To ignore the Nephilim is to miss a crucial dimension of the scriptural drama, a cosmic conflict that rages just beyond the veil of our reality. But their significance extends beyond the pages of the Bible. The echoes of their story in myths and legends worldwide suggest that they tap into a universal human experience. They represent our shared fascination with the gigantic, the powerful, and the forbidden. They are the archetypal other, the monster at the gate. Whether you see them as a historical memory, a psychological archetype, or a theological truth, the Nephilim force us to confront the biggest questions. Where do we come from? What are the limits of human nature? And are we truly alone in the universe? This exploration was never intended to give you a final, definitive answer. Its purpose was not to close the book on the Nephilim, but to open it wider for you. Our journey together has been about equipping you with the maps, the tools, and the perspectives needed to embark on your own investigation. We have laid out the evidence, presented the major theories, and explored the profound implications. Now, the quest passes into your hands. The path forward is yours to choose, and the discoveries you make will be your own. This is your personal invitation to become a seeker of truth. Dig deeper into this mystery and others like it. For those of you who are people of faith, the journey continues in the pages of Scripture and in the realm of prayer. Read the Bible with new eyes. Be unafraid of difficult and mysterious passages. Wrestle with the text, study the language, and explore the ancient context. Ask God for wisdom and discernment. Let the story of the Nephilim deepen your understanding of spiritual realities and strengthen your resolve to live a life that honors God in a world still influenced by ancient powers. Your faith is not a destination, it is an ongoing adventure of discovery. And this mystery is one of its most exciting frontiers. For skeptics and those outside the Christian faith, your quest may follow a different path, but is no less important. Continue exploring the Bible as a rich historical and literary document. Analyze it, critique it, and compare it to other great stories of humanity. Use this mystery as a gateway to understanding the ancient mind and the role myths and religious narratives have played in shaping civilization. An honest, open-minded investigation will lead to profound truths about our shared human story. Do not let your exploration end here. Seek out the books, articles, and documentaries we have drawn from. Engage in conversations with others on this journey. Join communities like our Kingdom Keys Seekers to share findings and learn from others. The search for truth is rarely solitary. It is a collaborative effort, a grand conversation that has been unfolding for centuries. Your voice and discoveries are a vital part of that dialogue. The greatest adventures are those we share, and the greatest mysteries are those we solve together. The story of the Nephilim is one of many kingdom keys, hidden in Scripture and the world around us. These mysteries, when pursued, unlock deeper understanding and wisdom. They challenge our assumption and expand our vision of reality. Whether you are a believer deepening your relationship with God, or a seeker searching for meaning in a complex world, these keys are available to you. Not reserved for scholars or theologians, they are for anyone with a curious mind and an open heart, anyone willing to ask the hard questions. We are Kingdom Keys Seekers, Our mission, journey alongside you in search of profound truths. We explore the Bible's greatest mysteries, uncover forgotten histories, and shed light on spiritual realities shaping our world. Our channel is a community for the curious, for the brave, for the hungry, a place for those unsatisfied with simple answers, who believe treasures are found in the deepest places. If this journey ignited a spark in you, you found a home. We invite you to take the next step. Subscribe and click the notification bell. Every video is a new key, a new door to a new mystery. We have more to explore together. The secrets of the Ark of the Covenant, the lost book of Enoch, and prophecies unfolding today. By subscribing, you join thousands of seekers, sharing insights and encouraging one another. The search for truth is the noblest journey, a path of wonder, challenges, and life-changing discoveries. The Nephilim gave us a glimpse of a stranger, more magnificent world. This is only the beginning. Countless keys await and countless doors await opening. Thank you for joining us. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and never lose your thirst for truth. The kingdom keys await.